I lost my limb.
Biosecurity chemicals are counterfeit.
In 1 week, we lost 21,000 chicken.
For a while now, Ugandan media has been awash with headlines about contaminated meat. To add more flesh to those headlines, the same media suggests a restricted drug called formalin is being used by some butchers as a preservative. So what is formalin? How does a restricted drug end up on our plates? And who among the stakeholders is dropping the ball? We have a big panel to discuss an issue that has caught the entire nation by the head. Everyone is discussing just how dangerous the meat we have been eating for a very long time could be, and what are the side effects. We have experts on the show tonight that will tell us everything about formalin and the way forward. I'm Andrew Kabura. I'll be your host. The panel is next.
I lost my limb.
Biosecurity chemicals are counterfeit.
In 1 week, we lost 21,000 chicken.
All right, welcome to the program, and thank you very much for joining us as well as we continue shedding more light and creating more awareness about one of the bigger problems that currently are facing our societies, and not just the societies at a personal level, but world economies as well. Counterfeiting. This is a special program packaged by the Anti-Counterfeit Network Africa, who pretty much are letting everyone across the globe know that the problem that is counterfeit is one that has been with us for such a long time. Sometimes we know we are falling victims, and sometimes we just don't know. Because I tell you what, and this is the alarmist part of the topic, every single product, almost every single product could be counterfeit today, and you've been consuming this for a very, very long time. So let me ask you a question. How much trouble are you in? And how many of these products have you consumed from morning to evening? My name is Andrew Kabura, welcoming you to the show one more time. I'll introduce my panel. I'll start off with the gentleman at my extreme left, Mr. Fred Muema, who is a practicing lawyer, also Director Legal and Corporate Affairs at SCN. SCN, everyone has been talking about Anti-Counterfeit Network Africa. What is the difference between a counterfeit and a substandard product?
Okay, first of all, very quickly, SCN is a platform that brings together a united front for stakeholders who affect and are affected by counterfeits to be able to act in unison to fight fake products. And it is SCN Africa because counterfeits provide or present a cross-border problem. It's not just in one country, but fakes run across the porous borders of our countries, and it's a global problem. What is counterfeiting? In simple terms, counterfeiting is organized crime. Because what a counterfeiter does, basically, is to steal somebody's product and copies it, imitates it, and sells it to the consumer as if it was the genuine original product. And the objective usually is to gain dishonestly or to defraud the consumer because they don't get value for money. On the other hand, a substandard product is regulated by another legal regime. In fact, you have different laws regulating substandard products. But this is basically a law regulating standards. What is things to do with the shelf life, for example, of a product. That is a standards issue. It's not a counterfeit issue. Things to do with the weight of a product. Things to do with the ingredients of a product. Those are standard issues, though they can also be counterfeit issue. But at the Anti-Counterfeit Network, we don't want to split hairs so much on the difference between the two, because the net effect is that they both substantially affect the consumer in a very bad way, as we shall be hearing in these programs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwema. We're also super excited today, I must mention, that we are joined by Dr. Vincent Karuhanga, who is a medical practitioner at Friends Polyclinic, but also a media personality. You probably have seen him on so many other outlets. For decades, he's been talking about the practice and trying to explain to the consumers out there what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Doctor, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Our headline today, we are talking formalin, we're talking meat. But that can't be the first question I ask you. I wanted us to look into your own backyard. We've heard about fake doctors, we've heard about fake drugs. So you cannot come here and talk about formalin like your own house is clean.
No, yeah, I don't own the doctors. So I cannot say that they are fake doctors and therefore I shouldn't talk about fake things. Yeah.
But how big is the problem though?
It's very big. It's very big because many fake doctors are called quack doctors, and where they work are called quackeries. So, and they look better than the real substance, really, and you'll never know. But they do exist, and sometimes the public will not know them because they switch talk. But for us, we know them. Yeah, we know them because many of them, especially, have been associated with the medical practices, though they purport to be what they are not. Yes.
We shall jump into those details later on in the show. You probably are getting scared now. You're getting your phone and rechecking your doctor's number and probably knowing if he's a certified doctor. But I'll quickly move on to the CEO Uganda Beef Producers Cooperatives. That is Dr. Joshua White. So thank you very much for joining us on the show today. When you first heard of formalin, did you enter the house and lock the door and make some contacts with the cooperatives across the country? How hard was this information to take in?
First, I didn't have to lock the door. So many questions came in. Was questions like, is it for real? Is it just a media story, someone trying to catch attention? But on second thought, when you get sober those moments, you're like, okay, maybe something out there needs to be checked. So that is how you come up to understand the detail of the story.
I want to turn to the doctor immediately so we can get this out of the way. Doc, in medical terms, the simplest of terms, what is formalin and why is it a restricted drug?
You see, we have formalin is supposed to contain formaldehyde. It is supposed also to contain some alcohol. So many times you find that it is something we are associated with. It is in the atmosphere where we get this formaldehyde. Because body processes, whether in the atmosphere, we have some kind of formaldehyde. But the problem comes when it is in liquid form and being used for something else which shouldn't be used for. For example, it has formaldehyde, like I said, and it has some other substances, but mostly formaldehyde, which we fear most. Methanol is also there, and eventually these substances will not remain what they are. They are converted into other dangerous substances such as formic acid. The body, when it breaks down proteins, it also forms formaldehyde, but the amounts are so low that they don't cause us problems. When you see smoke contains a lot of formaldehyde, but and this is why many times when you breathe in smoke, and yet this contains very little amounts of formaldehyde, because formaldehyde is easily changed, is easily oxidized, and it forms other substances. But still, you'll find that it will affect someone. People have complained of tightness in the chest, breathing issues, because they have breathed smoke. But you imagine that now you have a more concentrated product coming to you in terms of, I can call it contaminated meat. So it could be very, very dangerous.
Doctor, I want to stick with you for a second. What is it originally supposed to be used for? And if you could give us a quick feel of what's its general impact on our body, general health, what exactly happens to a human body apart from, chest stiffness? What is the general impact it's got on a consumer of meat out there?
You see, like we have said, when we talk about formalin, it has a percentage of formaldehyde, but it has other substances. And this is found in many industries. Industries where they make adhesives, industries where paints are made. And of course, as a preservative, it is used as a preservative, and that is one reason why it is used to preserve dead bodies. Apart from being used as a preservative, you know that even some of our foods actually, especially the fish, have been cleaned up using formaldehyde. But these are little quantities. They don't have so much effect. But when it comes to the real liquid formalin being sprayed onto meat, and sometimes even in milk, by the way, it is also there in milk. We are talking about meat, but milk is much more affected than meat. So when those substances are taken, they have an immediate impact. They have an impact which can last a lifetime, and eventually a person can even die thinking that he's dying because the good Lord has taken him, and yet the good butcher is the one taking him. Now, what happens is that this formaldehyde or formalin or whatever can go into a gaseous state, and usually in nature it is found in a gaseous state. So it means, therefore, that even the person who is using it to preserve meat is actually suffering. In fact, he may suffer more than the person who is going to eat the meat, because one reason is that every day he's using it, and therefore he's taking it in every day. And it forms an alcohol. So you may find him high, and you wonder what is happening. You even abuse him, and you say, I don't want to buy from a drunkard, and yet he's trying to poison you. And then he himself, of course, will also eat the meat. So a person, a butcher who is using this formalin should be protected, as well as the people who are going to consume the meat where he has put the formalin.
I'm trembling, to be honest with you, because when you listen to the explanation from the doctor and the fact that we're using this every single day, probably for some of these butchers, so many question marks now coming up on how much you actually have taken in. So what I'm going to do is take some water so the entire crew can calm down, is take a very quick break. When we come back, we start from the top. What went wrong? Are there no other preservatives? It's the Anti-Counterfeit Network, and we're trying to make sure we shed light on the problems that you know, but just haven't paid attention. When we get back.
I lost my limb.
Biosecurity chemicals are counterfeit.
In 1 week, we lost 21,000 chicken.
Welcome back as we continue shedding more light on the counterfeit world and trying to look at what problems are in there and probably who is dropping the ball in so many other sectors. And at some point, explaining to you how we easily can move on from this very sector. So as our friends, our relatives, and the future generations can actually be very, very safe. Now, we've been talking about formalin. We are still talking about formalin. It's been such a big headline in the newspapers recently with those reports suggesting that the butchers are actually using this restricted drug to preserve the meat that we eat every single day, which is quite interesting that the CEO Uganda Beef Producers Cooperatives, Dr. Waiswa, is here with us. So are we out of options for preservatives? Is there a goon that is just selling this every single day, or the regulators don't know even what is happening?
It is a complex situation where most of the butchers or the people who are supposed to be in the meat sector, one, could not be aware of what are the right preservatives to use for meat. Two is maybe there is quick access to what people are calling formalin, but I would prefer we call it restricted drugs for preservation of meat. Then the other is, I think, people are not supervising these premises properly. One, the preservatives that we have, for example, in Kampala, rosemary is very accessible, especially if you really need it. Someone out there will be like, where is the rosemary I can look for? But it is everywhere. Salt is everywhere. Okay, it's not good to put salt on fresh meat, but you can access these preservatives. But what options does a butcher have to preserve meat? The consumer behavior is that I buy fresh meat. Frozen meat is not preferred, chilled meat is not preferred, salted meat is not preferred. But why don't the authorities inspect and certify these premises? What does it take for you to have a certified premise? Because before I open any business, especially in any local government, I must obtain a license, I must obtain a medical examination certificate, I must obtain a slaughterman's permit, something like that. Why is it that these people are applying these chemicals on these products?
What is it we need for a good slaughterhouse? What must a butcher and the butchery have in place before doing business and selling us this meat? Because I don't want to blame just the consumers. Fred, I'll be coming to you very shortly. But what is it we need at these places, and who makes sure these places actually have everything to make sure our meat is clean?
One, the keyword is all these places, the premises must be certified. And by certification, it means you must meet certain criteria. The butcheries that we are looking at, you must have waste disposal sections. You must separate different meats. If it is, if you're having offals and the muscle meat, what we are calling the meat, the red meat, you need to separate. If by coincidence you have pork and beef, you need to separate the two, which is a rare occurrence. Then you need to have well clean, easy to clean walls. You need to have well aeration. You need to have areas that if in any way close to an accommodation premise, they should have a good entrance.
Yes.
Now the challenge that is here is whoever feels like they have some easy to access capital is opening up a stall, is opening up a butchery without that information. And people, the local authorities are mindful more of the revenue coming from these businesses starting. They are licensing everything. They are licensing every stall that is coming up. And the concept of anyone can start a butchery is killing the business. So I feel that there is more that needs to be done at the certification level. Because before you're certified, you need to know the business you're going into, not because you have access to animals that are going to be slaughtered, or you have a friend who can get you meat from the slaughterhouse.
So, Council Member, two issues that I pick from here. One is the regulators need to give us more information on what these butcheries need to look like, because I go around Kampala and I've seen people buy meat from places that probably shouldn't be bought. But secondly, have we as the consumers dropped the ball as well? How much do we supervise the origin of this meat?
Andrew, I think the word consumers will come up all the time, but I think the consumer is becoming a punching bag because a blind consumer, an ignorant consumer cannot actually make informed choices or decisions. And that is what is actually happening out there. When the consumers see a butchery operating right at a rubbish dump, and they will even see KCC officials, city council authority officials collecting dues from the nearby market, they will think it is okay. So they'll go and buy. So there is a complete failure on the part of the regulators to safeguard the public from harmful and or contaminated meat. Regulation for meat products did not begin yesterday. For as long as Uganda has existed, at least in terms of laws, we've had laws for the last 100 years. Why is it that we are only hearing of contamination now? That, to use your word, means that the standards of the ball has been dropped, as you say. And I would like to cite here very clearly the persons that are culpable. There is, even with decentralization that we began here, which decentralized the supervision and control from the central government under the Ministry of Agriculture and more industry to the local governments, the respective administrative units that are created. The ultimate authority remains with that whole channel. But in terms of the place of selling of meat, each administrative unit, each local government must have the veterinary officer, it must have the medical officer of health, it must have all those inspectors who will go, even before the butcher operates, they will first of all, on an application being made to get a permit to operate a butcher, they will have to go and inspect the premises and satisfy themselves about the physical condition of the premises. Is there sufficient space? How is the lighting? How is the sanitation? How is the drainage? How is the storage? The requirement to freeze, to have cold storage for meat is an international standard. And we have had in this country the Standards Bureau actually codifying these international standards into the local standards to ensure that we have meat. We are not short of regulation or the laws. The laws are written. UNBS, for example, has written standards on how to operate abattoirs and slaughterhouses, on how to transport meat. All those things are there. The problem is that these guys have gone to sleep and the consumer is getting a raw deal. And all we do is we get small press releases, small statements issued by the director so-and-so to say we are handling it, but on the ground they are not handling. So I think what we need to do is to empower the consumer to start asking questions right from your local community. Ask your LC, ask your local area MP, ask your local leader. I had a program, I'm told we are supposed to have ABC. Why are we not having it? Because it has got to start from down, moving up. But at the same time, we must hold the government and the local authorities accountable, because the consumer is actually paying. You see, by the time a cow leaves Kiruhura to reach Imbarara, a lot of taxes and charges have been paid by the consumer, okay, to make sure that it's meat. And even after you get it to the fork, you're still paying. So I think there is a need for more awareness and consciousness to the consumer to say, look, first of all, you have a right to quality meat or quality food, but also two, there is an obligation visited on somebody or a group of persons who must do their job. I think the pressure must be on these regulators to do their job. That's why for this show, for example, we were supposed to have the regulator from the Kampala City Council to tell us about all these marauding butcheries and the state of the abattoirs and slaughterhouses. These are questions, because the public doesn't know this final product that you are consuming. Do you know the state of the abattoirs and slaughterhouses? Before even you go to the butchery, do you know where the meat is coming from? I guarantee you, if the public gets to know the state of the abattoirs, they will have a different kind of conversation. And the anti-counterfeit network in this fight will go as far as the abattoirs and butcheries to show exactly what it is we have in terms of infrastructure for getting us the meat. So I think more and more has to be done. This formalin issue has not just come now. Our research shows it has been around for quite some time. And this being a drug under the control of the National Drug Authority, we know that there are gaps and loopholes. NDA needs to explain. NDA hosts the food desk, okay, where all the other authorities are. They need to come and explain, how does a butcher in Sanji come into contact with this formalin in those quantities and then use it as a preservative.
I want to move away from formalin, because there seems to be way more contaminants out there that definitely are affecting our meat. So in so many ways, formalin is being the punching bag to the dog.
Yes.
We've seen media reports where top supermarkets in this country have had meat sections closed because authorities don't feel that meat is clean enough. This has rendered that old medical statement, food is medicine, irrelevant. So are we focusing just on formalin and ignoring so much that is contaminating our meat?
Yes, of course, we are ignoring many other things. Since he has talked of the butcheries being checked by doctors, it is very, very important that the butchers themselves don't spread the disease. For example, do they check them for disease conditions like tuberculosis or disease conditions like typhoid? Yeah, they can spread to people who eat the meat. Then there are other preservatives which are actually being used. So if you stop formalin, what about sodium bisulfite or metabisulfite as we call it? It is also a very dangerous drug which is usually used as bleach, but people are using it as a preservative, and it can also cause a lot of problems. So if the authorities go to check and find that there is no formalin, they should know that there are others that are being used. So, by the way, also dangerous to health. For example, that sulfite can be very dangerous to breathe in. Once one takes it in, breathes it in, he can get asthmatic attacks, he can get problems with the lungs. Then if it is eaten in meat, because it makes meat look more red, and it will even look better than the fresh meat, because fresh meat here is hanging in the stalls and it is losing blood. Blood is part and parcel of what makes meat look fresh, but this one will make it even more red, and you will think that it is even much better than the other meat, and it's much more dangerous.
I want to take a break now, but when I come back, I want to ask Council Mwema. The law says there should specific health officials that are checking most of these butcheries to make sure the standards are kept fine. So I want us to talk about that and see whether they're actually doing their job. But also, Dr. Weiss, I want to ask you, when we come back, what the standards are. We've talked about some of the standards now, but these doctors that are supposed to be checking these different butcheries, first of all, are they enough? And secondly, are they actually checking? We're trying to make sure every single day you step out there, you're eating the right meat. When we come back.
I lost my limb.
Biosecurity chemicals are counterfeit.
In 1 week, we lost 21,000 chicken.
Welcome back. The Anti-Counterfeit Network Africa continues with spreading the awareness when it comes down to everything counterfeit, everything that is affecting our wealth and health as well. In case you're just joining us now, we are talking contaminated meat, which has been a very big headline pretty much for all newspapers, radios and television here in Uganda. Everyone has been talking about formalin and how dangerous it is. Well, before we went for the break, I turned to Dr. Waiswa, and we're talking about the other contaminants at these butcheries, because formalin might take the heat. But more interestingly, do we have enough vets? Because I saw a press release the other day with the president of the Uganda Veterinary Association, Sylvia Baluka, saying government should have more laboratories testing meat that is going out for distribution.
Yes, Andrew, I'll start with what the president, my president, Uganda Veterinary Association, said about the laboratories. Much as it's a good gesture, but I always refer to consumer behavior in the country of residence. In Europe, maybe that would work because people look at matured meat, frozen meat, chilled meat. Here we look at eating meat fresh. So waiting for a lab result to come back before meat is dispatched will take quite a long time. But all that said, at every local government, they are supposed to have veterinary veterinary doctors or medical workers. Others are these days called environmental health workers, who are going to participate in the inspection, who are going to qualify certain criteria in these butcheries. But we have to look at meat from a bigger picture. What contaminates meat? Meat can be contaminated, people call in mainly two ways. One is the endogenous and the exogenous, that is internally and while exposed to the environment. Internally is mainly before meat gets to the butchery. That is maybe a sick animal was slaughtered, so it had this microorganism, this small thing there disturbing, and it continues producing more bacteria even after slaughter. Then the exogenous, that is the outside bit or the external bit, is people carrying the meat after slaughter. If you look there at the way people carry the meat on their shoulders.
On their backs.
On their backs. If you look at the way the transporters move, how many times have they disinfected those boxes labeled KCMT? How many? Is it KMC, something like that? How many times have they disinfected it or cleaned it? Then you come at the butchery itself. I always tell people that most of the butcheries at the outskirts of Kampala and major towns, we have a wooden stamp, okay? In January, it could be maybe 1 meter high. By December, it needs replacement. But where do we get those wooden specks? Where do we get them? They end up in the meat.
Yeah.
So we are dealing with a bigger problem.
Dr. Karanga, how come we are still alive? Because he's telling me about all this and the contamination. I have gone to some of these butcheries myself, seen what happens. How on earth are we still moving and breathing?
Mr. Kavura, we are still alive, just like you find a mad person on a dustbin who is big or fat, and then you say people who eat from dustbins are actually immunizing themselves, and that's why they are that big and they don't suffer so much from diseases. But when you look at it, you'll find that you can never find a very old madman. Where do they go? They die. So we also die, but we actually blame ghosts. We blame some other things, and yet we are actually killing ourselves. Why do we have lots of cancer? Why do we have certain kinds of diseases propping up? It is very well known that if one takes in formalin for a long time, is likely to get these cancers. Do the formalin and other contaminants can cause serious health hazards. The metabisulfite, for example, can cause asthma. Even the formalin itself, once it is breathed in, it can cause asthma symptoms, it can damage the lungs. They also damage the intestines, they damage the liver. So when you die of a liver problem, they will not say that you died because you ate meat which was contaminated. But I know for sure that the lifespan of a Ugandan is not that big. And it could be because of our lifestyle, of things we are taking in, which are actually not proper.
Mr. Mwema, I want to conclude with you on regulation. And I stick to regulation as a way of moving forward to conclude this, because I was talking to Dr. Weiss when he was telling me the meat industry, especially the butchers, the industry is so informal that not more than 2% of them have bank accounts. It is go, make some little money, go home. So standards will always be questioned if that is the level of business we are operating at. But he talks about medical workers at some of these joints, at some of these districts. He talks about vets in the other statement. Are we using the wrong manpower, and what is the way forward?
Doctor mentioned that in respect of the issue of labs to test the meat and so on, under the law, a medical officer of health, a vet officer, or any other authorized officer from the local authority has power to impound suspected contaminated meat. And the defense to that impoundment is not that it will take long or we need to eat the meat quickly, return it. They have power to hold on to that meat for as long as is necessary to do the tests. And of course, there the issue of the labs comes in, because if you're going to impound meat on suspicion that it's contaminated and there are no labs to test, then that point comes in. But they even have power to order the destruction if they find that it's not okay. Again, I want to emphasize here, the raw deal consumers are getting is that whereas the laws are in place, the regulators are not enforcing the laws. It's pure negligence, as simple as that. Ask anybody in charge of meat to give you a report of inspection, because by law, they have got to monitor and evaluate compliance. But ask for a compliance report from any of these districts to say how was the performance, how many cattle moved, how much how many kilograms, tonnage, and so. So I think what we should be doing now is a little bit get more clarity on the law, because like for the meat ordinance, we have it now for 12 years, but there's vagueness on inspection because the law says it says the vet officer or a medical officer or any other person duly authorized by the local government. So if tomorrow Kira Town Council appoints somebody with qualifications of BA Arts or somebody who has a diploma in law to be a meat inspector, he will be a meat inspector. But is that what is required under the Food and Agriculture Organization Code on maintaining standards on quality? No. So it is things like this which come to the forefront, and the doctors explaining to us that it's causing disease. This, when we were young, we used to only fall sick. Your temperature would only rise if you had malaria. These days, you go, you have a fever, and it's not malaria. But the doctors will say it's a bacterial infection. Where is this bacteria coming from? It's coming from, I'm sure, from the food that we are eating. So it's as if the consumers and all of us have entered into a suicide pact to slowly but surely kill ourselves. And by the way, committing suicide is a crime under the law. So it appears we are collectively and individually committing suicide and committing a crime, and we are happy and we're laughing about it, and as we die. This is what we are doing. But the doctor will tell you, I used to ask myself, why is it that when somebody has died and they're in the coffin, they open the coffin for a short time to view and close? I've now got the answer. Because the formalin evaporates and it is injurious. They can't keep the body exposed and open. So I think going forward, we need more action from the authorities. The consumer, again, yes, the consumer, after today, the consumer should make a commitment to be more safe, because it's your life. These people who say the government is not doing this, they should do this for us, but this is your life. If you died, the government doesn't die. It is you who dies.
Mr. Mwema, I want to take you to a completely different sphere of this. And this is because I've talked to people who are in the meat industry, and I've talked to some of these service providers. I mean, what do you say to someone who says a hotel will need, or a restaurant will need 100 kilograms of meat? They go to an official supplier with stamped meat, meaning this meat has been checked, it's very safe. But instead of the 100 kilograms, they get 40 kilograms that have stamped meat, have someone from a suburban Kampala, probably unchecked meat with the rest of the 60 kilograms, mix it up, and when the authorities come, they say, boss, we have the official documents, and our meat is safe. Aren't we, even in problems we probably don't understand?
Our informers at SCN and field personnel have busted a racket of illicit meat supplies to big chains of hotels and other entities that serve food, which at the front will have the official certification that this is, for example, our supplier. There are some institutions that will only deal with a certain hotel if they know the source of your products. So the representation will be that this is our source. We buy from this butchery. But in actual fact, they only buy 10, 20% from that source and fill it up with the border guys, the bicycle riders, with the open air, meat transportation and so on. And this is causing a lot of damage, but it's also damage to ourselves, but also to the economy, because I think up to now, you'll tell me, I don't know if we can still export meat products easily. The reason why there was a ban on export of Ugandan meat is because a due diligence was done by certain markets. They came here and found that actually there was a lot of contamination and probably deceit in some of the products that they were not meeting the standards that were being exported. So the problem, the rot, is not just at the small butchery where the ordinary person is. There's also the corporate dishonesty that is being shown from the so-called A-class persons who should be serving meat. That's why sometimes somebody will go to a huge hotel outlet and have a meal, and later they get a problem. They get food poisoning. Why? Because of the integrity sometimes of the supplier has been compromised.
It's quite scary information at some point, let's face it. When you listen in carefully, you probably get scared. But I want to say thank you very much to Council Mwema for joining us. Dr. Karanga, thank you very much for coming and shedding some more light on this issue. Dr. Weisel, thank you very, very much. And I want to conclude by asking you a very simple question. Have you eaten meat today? Or are you planning to eat meat later on today? Did you eat meat yesterday? Or did you deliver meat somewhere to make sure you bring a beautiful feast to a certain family? Where did that meat come from? Are you very sure where that meat came from? And have you wondered for how long you've eaten meat in a condition or a situation that could be one we are discussing? It's a very big debate. All we can say is don't be fake. Buy and sell genuine.